The first pages of Bridget Jones's diary open not with a grand adventure or sweeping romance, but with a resolution list scribbled down on New Year's Day. The year is just beginning in London, and the city itself seems to sigh with her. A gray sky, the promise of reinvention, and the unshakable weight of expectation pressing on her shoulders. She is 30-something, single and teetering between self-mockery and optimism. As she writes, she catalogues her vices like a scientist listing lab samples. Cigarettes, alcohol units, pounds on the scale, calories consumed. Each number feels like a confession, a ledger of sins she swears she will correct. She vows to lose weight, to stop smoking, to cut down on drinking, to finally get her life in order. The diary is more than paper. It is her confessional booth, her battlefield, her therapist's couch. Each line is scratched with the urgency of someone who wants desperately to change but knows, even as she writes, that she is both sincere and self-sabotaging. She mocks herself for being obsessed with her boss, Daniel Cleaver, the handsome cad whose charm clings like perfume long after he has left the room. She promises herself not to text him. She writes in capitals as if the force of her pen can override her longing. But the more she resists, the more she wants to give in. London hums outside her window. Buses grinding through slush, taxis honking, people wrapped in scarves, heading into the new year with the same hopes and fears she carries. Yet Bridget feels as though she is on her own peculiar island, caught between adulthood and adolescence, craving both independence and the warmth of belonging. Her friends, Shazzer, Jude, and Tom, are her lifeboats, their nights together fueled by wine, cigarettes, and confessions that echo her own. They laugh about diets, disastrous men, and the endless patronizing questions from relatives. Still no boyfriend, Bridget? The laughter is a shield, but the sting remains. As she records her weight obsessively, up a pound, down 2, up 3 again, she reveals her real struggle, not just with calories, but with self-worth. Each glass of Chardonnay, each late-night binge of cheese, each failed morning jog becomes another tally in her mind of inadequacy. And yet she refuses to stop hoping. Every resolution, though fragile, is a flare she shoots into the January sky, a signal that she still believes in change, in the possibility of something more. In this diary, Bridget begins to weave together the contradictions of her life. She is both cynical and romantic, both self-mocking and yearning. She is exhausted by the expectations of others, yet she longs to meet them. She is lonely, yet terrified of settling. She is above all honest, sometimes brutally, hilariously, heartbreakingly so. And through her words, we are invited not only to observe her struggles, but to step into them, to see ourselves in the flicker between her laughter and her longing. As the year dawns, the pages of her diary are blank, waiting. And Bridget Jones, pen in hand, is determined that this year will be different. She will not make the same mistakes. She will not fall for the wrong man. She will be a new woman. Or so she tells herself before reaching for another cigarette and another glass of wine, the ink blotting the paper as midnight slips away. The resolutions glow on the page like commandments etched in permanent ink. I will not smoke. I will drink no more than 14 alcohol units a week. I will reduce the circumference of my thighs by 3 inches. I will not fall in love with emotionally unavailable men. Bridget copies them down with a mix of earnestness and mischief, as though writing them might somehow make them true. But within hours, her diary betrays her. She finds herself nursing a large glass of Chardonnay, half a packet of cigarettes gone, stomach rumbling from a late-night binge on cheese. The rules are broken almost as soon as they're written, and she records each infraction with self-scolding humor, calling herself tragic, sad, fat, then shrugging it off with the kind of resilience that keeps her turning the page. At work, Bridget is a junior at a London publishing house, drowning in manuscripts and corporate politics. The office is a swirl of gossip, power plays, and copy deadlines. Hovering above it all is Daniel Cleaver, her rakish boss with the crooked smile, witty emails, and a reputation as a charming disaster. She knows he's a man best admired from a safe distance, but his attention feels like sunlight on her skin. A wink from Daniel, a teasing message dropped into her inbox, and suddenly all her resolutions about not dating unsuitable men are little more than ink stains. Outside the office, she's juggling the chaos of her personal life. Nights blur into parties with her friends, Shazzer with her fiery feminist rants, Jude with her endless tales of romantic disappointment, and Tom with his biting humor and tender heart. Together they form a kind of surrogate family, a shield against the pitying stares of smug marrieds who dominate every dinner party. Still, the questions never stop. "When will you settle down, Bridget?" her mother asks at every family gathering, as though marriage were a department store purchase she had irresponsibly delayed. Her mother, in fact, is a drama all on her own. Suddenly reinventing herself with a new social circle, she flutters from one scheme to another, dragging Bridget along to cooking shows and bizarre social functions. Bridget oscillates between exasperation and reluctant amusement, scribbling every mortifying detail into her diary. And yet, through the hangovers and humiliations, Bridget clings to the thrill of possibility. Each flirtatious glance from Daniel, each laugh shared with her friends, each promise to start fresh on Monday feels like a spark. Maybe, she tells herself, this is what life is meant to be. Messy, funny, and full of second chances. But in the quiet of her flat, as she tallies calories and promises to become a thinner, wiser, better version of herself, a question lingers between the lines. If she is always chasing a new Bridget, when will she ever feel at peace with the one she already is? The office hums with the sound of phones ringing, keyboards clattering, and the occasional hiss of the photocopier jamming. Bridget sits at her desk, trying to look productive, though her mind drifts toward Daniel Cleaver, her boss with the lopsided grin and the kind of confidence that fills a room before he even steps into it. He sends her cheeky emails full of innuendo, lines that make her blush and roll her eyes in equal measure. She knows from whispered warnings and her own instincts that Daniel is trouble. But when he leans against her desk, tie loosened, voice low, she feels a dangerous thrill she can't quite resist. Work itself is a tangle of embarrassments. One day, she types an internal memo about Daniel's supposed womanizing and in a catastrophic click sends it to him instead of her best friend. The seconds afterward feel like hours. She can practically hear the blood pounding in her ears as she watches her screen, hoping the email might somehow vanish on its own. It doesn't. The office gossips raise their eyebrows and she wants the ground to swallow her whole. Later that afternoon, Daniel strolls by, amused rather than angry, a twinkle in his eye as he teases her for her little diary entry. What should have been mortifying becomes, in its way, intoxicating. Meanwhile, the chorus of voices in her life grows louder. Her mother is still on a crusade to marry her off, parading her in front of eligible bachelors who speak in pompous tones about mortgages and their golf handicaps. At every gathering, Bridget feels like the odd sock in the laundry pile, unmatched, unnecessary, out of place. Her father is kind, but distracted, overshadowed by her mother's flair for reinvention and the sudden appearance of a smarmy Portuguese suitor who takes up all her mother's attention. And then there's Mark Darcy. The name alone conjures centuries of English romantic fantasy, but the man himself is less than charming. At a New Year's turkey curry buffet, Bridget notices him standing stiffly in a hideous reindeer jumper, looking down his nose at the chaos of drunken relatives and overcooked food. When they're introduced, he manages to insult her in a single remark about her stupid little opinions, and Bridget's cheeks burn with humiliation and fury. She scribbles in her diary that he is an arrogant, unattractive snob and resolves never to speak to him again. Still, there's something there. Something unsettling about the way his eyes lingered, as if he saw through her, fumbling to something she hadn't yet admitted even to herself. For now, though, Daniel is easier. Daniel is fun. He flatters her, invites her to lunch, slips her notes that make her giggle in the middle of staff meetings. She tells herself this is it. Her resolution is working. She is slimming down, controlling her drinking, and she has finally snagged the attention of a man who makes her heart race. But the diary, ever honest, records the cracks forming beneath the surface. For every witty email, there is a night Daniel doesn't call. For every flirtation, a careless remark that makes her feel small. She resolves again and again not to fall into the same traps, not to be that woman who waits by the phone, but the pull of Daniel's charm is strong. In the quiet of her flat, the candlelight flickering across empty wine glasses and abandoned magazines, Bridget wonders whether love is meant to be this complicated, this painful, this confusing. She wants the fairy tale, the romance, the certainty of being chosen. Instead, she is trapped in the dizzying cycle of hope and humiliation, all while the year is only just beginning. And somewhere in the background, Mark Darcy, the man she has already dismissed as pompous and proud, lingers like a shadow she refuses to look at, though his presence stirs something she cannot name. Family gatherings are supposed to be comforting, a return to familiarity and warmth. But for Bridget, they often feel like a performance in a play she never auditioned for. The set is always the same, a crowded dining room filled with relatives who speak in polite daggers. The clink of crystal glasses, the smell of overcooked Brussels sprouts clinging to the air. As she arrives, her mother immediately swoops in, fussing with her hair and outfit, muttering that she really ought to try harder. It doesn't matter that Bridget has chosen her best dress or that she's already rehearsed witty lines in her head. In her mother's eyes, she is still the unmarried daughter, a project to be managed. The pressure is relentless. Every conversation circles back to her single status, as though she were some fragile antique in danger of being left on the shelf. Bridget can almost feel the smug marrieds watching her with pity. The couple sit together, polished and united, as if their wedding rings are proof of moral superiority. She jokes to mask the sting, scribbling later in her diary about their matching jumpers, their blue soup disasters, their children with names like Tarquin or Cosmo. Humor is her armor, but the barbs land all the same. Her mother, meanwhile, has discovered a new cause. A glitzy television shopping channel where she reinvents herself as a glamorous hostess, flitting around in sequined gowns. Bridget is both mortified and fascinated. The sight of her mother purring over kitchen gadgets on live TV is excruciating. Yet there's a strange bravery in it. While Bridget worries about being judged, her mother is out there basking in the spotlight, unapologetic, unabashed. The contrast gnaws at her. Maybe her mother's shamelessness is its own kind of freedom. Mark Darcy hovers in this world too, though never comfortably. At these gatherings, he seems stiff, always with a drink in hand, always slightly removed. Bridget catches him watching her again, his gaze unreadable. She bristles, assuming he's tallying her flaws the way she tallies her calories. Later, she scrawls in her diary, Mark Darcy, rude, arrogant, social disaster. Wouldn't date him if he were the last man on earth. Writing it feels defiant, a declaration of independence from the expectations pressing down on her. But even as she dismisses him, Bridget cannot help but remember the way he defended her once, awkwardly but earnestly, when a relative made a cutting remark about her single status. He had stumbled through his words, calling her a verbally incontinent spinster who smokes like a chimney and dresses like her mother. But beneath the awkwardness there had been sincerity. She wonders if perhaps she misread him. And then she closes the diary, pours herself another drink, and assures herself she has no time for cold men in ugly jumpers. Outside, fireworks crackle faintly in the distance. Inside, the laughter of her friends is louder, more genuine, but still tinged with the quiet ache of searching. Bridget smiles and tries to believe that her resolutions, thinner thighs, fewer drinks, a real boyfriend, will one day silence the voices around her. For now, she chooses to laugh louder, write more furiously, and keep turning the pages of her own imperfect, chaotic story. The more Bridget tells herself to resist Daniel Cleaver, the more he seems to seep into every corner of her life. His emails are cheeky, laced with double meanings and sly compliments, as if they were written with one eyebrow permanently raised. She checks her inbox obsessively, heart fluttering every time his name lights up her screen. It feels like being 17 again. Except now she's in her 30s, typing secret replies from her office computer, trying not to smudge her lipstick on her coffee mug. When Daniel suggests lunch, she tries to play it cool. She rehearses witty lines in her head, practicing them in the bathroom mirror. But the moment he smiles at her across the table, all resolve collapses. She laughs too loudly, drinks too quickly, and tells herself it's just harmless fun. But when his hand brushes hers, when he leans in just a little too close, Bridget's heart pounds with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this is what she's been waiting for. Their flirtation escalates into something more. Whispered jokes turn into stolen kisses, then into a passionate affair. Bridget knows she's breaking her own rules. She knows Daniel has a reputation for breaking hearts. But in the haze of wine and witty banter, those worries seem distant. Each time she's with him, she feels luminous, desirable, as though she's finally part of a story worth telling. Her diary pages fill with giddy confessions, punctuated with exclamation marks and underlined words, the script of a woman drunk not just on Chardonnay but on possibility. Yet even as she rides the high of being desired, shadows creep in. Daniel cancels plans at the last moment with flimsy excuses. He forgets small details, her birthday, their conversations, the things that matter. Bridget finds herself waiting by the phone again, staring at the blinking light, trying to pretend it doesn't matter. She berates herself in her diary. Do not call him. Do not send desperate text. Strong, independent women do not beg. Then she picks up the phone anyway and hates herself as she does it. Her friends see what she doesn't want to admit. Shazzer tells her flatly that Daniel is trouble, that he'll never commit. Jude offers statistics about men like him. Tom makes sarcastic jokes to soften the sting. But Bridget waves them off, clinging to the moments when Daniel is attentive, when his charm feels like sunshine. Better to have something than nothing, she tells herself. Better to be wanted, even imperfectly, than to sit alone counting calories and waiting for life to start. But late at night, in the silence of her flat, she cannot ignore the gnawing unease. She writes about his mixed signals, the silences between texts, the way he brushes off her attempts at seriousness with another joke. The diary, ever loyal, absorbs her doubts, her longing, her half-hearted promises to end it tomorrow. Each entry is both a confession and a plea, for clarity, for love, for something that feels real. In the distance, the figure of Mark Darcy flickers again. She remembers his quiet steadiness, the awkward but genuine way he defended her at the New Year's party. Compared to Daniel's glittering charm, Mark seems unbearably dull. Yet there's a solidity about him, a sense of honesty that unsettles her more than Daniel's careless charisma. Still, the thrill of the chase is irresistible. Bridget convinces herself that she can rewrite the ending this time, that she can transform a notorious flirt into a devoted partner. The resolutions in her diary, though, tell a different story. I will not sleep with emotionally unavailable men. The words stare back at her like a warning she refuses to heed. She shuts the book, pours another glass of wine, and tells herself she's finally living. For once, she feels as though she's the heroine in her own romantic comedy, blissfully unaware that every comedy must eventually stumble into conflict. The glitter of Daniel's charm begins to tarnish. What once felt like a thrilling, breathless romance starts to reveal jagged edges, and Bridget, pen scratching across diary pages at 2 in the morning, cannot deny the growing sense of unease. At first, it's small things. The unanswered phone calls, the sudden cancellations with flimsy excuses. He tells her he's caught up at work. But she knows the way his eyes dart, the way his texts go silent just when she needs him most. One evening, after hours of waiting for a promised dinner, Bridget finds herself alone again with a bottle of wine and a half-eaten bag of crisps. She writes furiously, "No more pining over men who can't even be bothered to show up." Strong, confident Bridget Jones does not sit by the phone like some Victorian spinster. Yet beneath the bold declarations lies a truth she doesn't want to admit. She's already hooked. Each time he does appear with that mischievous grin and an offhand compliment about her skirt, she melts back into him as though nothing happened. The cycle continues. Moments of ecstasy followed by days of silence. Promises followed by apologies, grand gestures followed by casual betrayals. Her friends try to intervene. Shazzer, ever the feminist firebrand, launches into a tirade about self-respect. Jude, armed with statistics about male commitment issues, warns Bridget to run before she's burned. Tom, with his sharp wit, calls Daniel the human equivalent of a faulty smoke alarm, constantly going off for no reason and impossible to rely on. Bridget laughs with them in the pub, but later in her tiny flat she can't ignore the emptiness that creeps in when she realizes Daniel hasn't even bothered to call goodnight. Then comes the breaking point. She discovers in the most humiliating way possible that Daniel has been unfaithful. A betrayal that stings not just because of what he's done, but because she knew deep down it was coming. All those little red flags she scribbled into her diary were not paranoid fantasies. They were the truth knocking at her door, and she had chosen to ignore it. The heartbreak is messy. There are tears, long nights of self-pity, desperate attempts to drown the ache in wine, cigarettes, and ice cream. She writes pages filled with self-recrimination, pages where she calls herself a fool, where she calculates how many calories she's consumed in tears and chocolate bars. She fears she's wasted not just months, but pieces of her own self-respect on a man who was never truly there. And yet, in the quiet moments after the storm of tears, a different feeling begins to stir. For the first time, she feels the faintest glimmer of something like strength. Maybe breaking the resolution wasn't just failure. Maybe it was a step toward learning what she will not accept anymore. Maybe every misstep she has recorded in these pages is not proof of her weakness, but of her willingness to keep moving forward, to keep hoping, to keep believing she deserves better. It's in this vulnerable state, mascara smudged, heart raw but strangely open, that she finds herself thinking again of Mark Darcy. The memory of his awkward defense of her resurfaces, no longer irritating but oddly comforting. He may have been blunt, stiff, even rude, but he had seen her, not as a project, not as a conquest, simply as Bridget with all her imperfections. The resolutions in her diary now read differently. They are no longer just about fitting into smaller jeans or drinking less wine. They have become questions, whispers of a deeper longing. What would it mean to stop apologizing? What would it mean to live as I am, not as I should be? The year is still young, but the shape of her journey is shifting. The fantasy of Daniel's charm is crumbling, and something more difficult, but perhaps more real, is waiting just beyond the edges of her page. Edges of her page, edges of her page, edges. It happens almost by accident. One moment, Bridget is still licking her wounds from Daniel's betrayal, trying to convince herself she's fine. The next, she's face to face with Mark Darcy again. He appears at yet another social function, standing there in his perpetual uniform of a stiff suit and a look that borders on disdain. At first, she bristles, bracing herself for another cutting remark about her clothes or her weight. But this time, There's a shift. His eyes soften when they meet hers, and instead of some scathing put-down, he stumbles over a compliment that feels almost embarrassed. Bridget writes in her diary that night, "Mark Darcy, pride personified, impossible. And yet, why did my stomach flutter?" She doesn't want to admit it, not after everything, not after the fireworks and heartbreak with Daniel. But there's something magnetic about the way Mark lingers nearby. He doesn't chase her with clever jokes or empty promises. Instead, he listens when she speaks, asks questions that make her feel like her thoughts matter. He is awkward, yes, but there's an honesty in his awkwardness that unsettles her more than Daniel's polished charm ever did. The contrast gnaws at her. Daniel was champagne bubbles and dizzy evenings, always on the brink of fizzling out. Mark is something slower, steadier, like a fireplace in winter. Not as thrilling, but warm, dependable. And yet Bridget cannot shake the memory of that first meeting at the turkey curry buffet, his stiff politeness and the way he seemed to judge her. The diary records her confusion in a tangle of capital letters and scratched-out lines. "Do not fall for Mark Darcy. Bad jumper, arrogant, and yet life continues to swirl around her." At work, Daniel struts through the office with the same careless charm, as though nothing has happened. Bridget steels herself against the pull of old habits, reminding herself of his betrayal, of the way he left her waiting for hours with nothing but an empty wine glass and a heavy heart. Still, when he smiles at her, she feels the old tug, and her diary becomes a battlefield of crossed-out resolutions and guilty admissions. Her friends are quick to weigh in. Shazzer, blunt as ever, demands to know why Bridget wastes another minute on men who treat her as disposable. Jude shares yet another disastrous date of her own, hoping perhaps to remind Bridget that they're all stumbling through the same labyrinth. Tom, ever dramatic, declares that if Bridget so much as looks at Daniel again, he'll stage an intervention. Their laughter at the pub is genuine, but beneath it is a shared desperation, a hope that one of them will find a way out of the cycle. And then, unexpectedly, Mark shows up in her world again, this time outside the office. There is no family dinner, no forced introduction, just an awkward encounter that turns into a conversation. He asks about her job, about her friends, about her life, and for once she doesn't feel like she's being measured against a checklist of accomplishments or dress sizes. She feels seen. The pages of her diary that night are different. Fewer exclamation marks, more pauses, more thought. Maybe he isn't so bad. Maybe he isn't the enemy after all. But even as she starts to sense a possibility, Bridget's old habits creep back in. She second-guesses herself, writes long lists of pros and cons, calculates the risk of heartbreak against the promise of something real. She fears she's not enough. Not thin enough, not accomplished enough, not put together enough for someone like him. And yet beneath the insecurity there is a pulse of hope she cannot quiet. Perhaps her story is about to shift. Perhaps her diary will finally hold the beginnings of something she never thought she deserved. A love that feels like home. Life, however, refuses to let Bridget glide smoothly toward anything resembling stability. No sooner has she begun to toy with the idea that Mark Darcy might not be as insufferable as she once thought than the universe conspires to remind her of her talent for chaos. It starts with a weekend away with Daniel, a so-called mini-break that she hopes will cement their romance. She packs lingerie with trembling excitement, imagines long walks in the countryside, the kind of tender conversations she's scribbled into her diary 100 times. Instead, reality delivers something far less cinematic. Rain pours down, the bed is lumpy, and Daniel seems more interested in his own reflection than in her. He flirts with waitresses, laughs too loudly at his own jokes, and treats their relationship as though it's a game he's already won. Bridget tries to brush it off with jokes, but when she catches him exchanging a lingering look with another woman, The foundations of her fragile dream tremble. Back in London, she throws herself into work only to stumble into further humiliation. She lands a spot on a morning television program. A chance, she thinks, to reinvent herself as a polished professional woman who can finally make her parents proud. But live television has its own appetite for disaster. She appears on screen with her skirt accidentally tucked into her underwear, stammers through her lines, and finishes her segment mortified. Later, she writes in her diary with a mix of despair and defiance. Note to self: never trust mirrors, never trust skirts, never trust anything except large quantities of wine. The diary becomes her lifeline, pages filled with both the comedy and the tragedy of her daily existence. She documents her frantic attempts to lose weight, the endless parade of self-help mantras she tries to adopt, the constant balancing act of pretending to be effortlessly charming while secretly holding herself together with caffeine and cigarettes. And yet, threaded through all the chaos is a sharp humor, a wry awareness of her own absurdity. She sees the comedy in her failings, and in that laughter she finds a strange kind of survival. It's during one of these professional disasters that Mark appears again. He doesn't laugh at her. He doesn't smirk. Instead, he steps in quietly, to smooth over her on-air blunders, offering a steady hand where Daniel once would have offered only mockery. Bridget, still flushed with embarrassment, is startled by his unexpected kindness. She wonders as she writes in her diary that night if perhaps she has been looking for affection in all the wrong places. But even as these moments of clarity sparkle like rare gems, Bridget's life remains a whirlwind of mishaps. There are awkward encounters with ex-boyfriends in restaurants, humiliating slip-ups at work, and nights when she wakes at 3 a.m., her head pounding, resolving once more to change. The resolutions multiply. No more late-night snacking. No more men who treat me like a side dish. No more pretending to be someone I'm not. She crosses out entire paragraphs, starts fresh only to fall into the same patterns again the very next day. The chaos is exhausting, but it is also, in its own strange way, life. And in those chaotic nights and mortifying mornings, Bridget begins to learn something she never expected. Maybe she doesn't have to be perfect to be loved. Maybe the mess is part of the story, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there might love her not in spite of it, but because of it. The truth does not arrive with a crash. It sidles in almost casually, like a draft through a half-open window. Bridget, who has trained herself to laugh off suspicion, cannot ignore what she sees. Daniel, all charm and smooth words, entangled with another woman. The confirmation of what her gut had whispered for weeks lands like a stone in her chest. She retreats to her diary that night, scribbling so furiously the ink smudges across the page. Idiot. Stupid, pathetic idiot. Vowed not to fall for liars, and here we are. Day ruined, year ruined, life ruined. Her world shrinks to the four walls of her flat. The fridge becomes her confessional. The wine bottle her unreliable friend. She counts cigarettes like prayers, calories like sins, and each tally becomes a weapon she uses against herself. One entry lists her failings in merciless shorthand. Weight, up 3 pounds. Cigarettes, 27 units of alcohol, uncountable. Self-respect, nil. She mocks herself in capital letters, trying to disguise the ache beneath the humor. Her friends rally as best they can. Shazza rants about how men like Daniel should come with government health warnings. Jude provides grim statistics about infidelity. Tom cracks jokes so sharp they nearly draw blood, insisting Daniel should be boiled in his own hair gel. Their laughter is loud, but it's the kind that breaks apart too quickly, leaving silence behind. In that silence, Bridget feels the raw wound of betrayal, a private pain that no amount of communal jokes can quite soothe. Then, almost without warning, Mark Darcy steps into the scene again. Not with flirtation, not with charm, but with a quiet presence. He appears at her side in moments when she least expects it, offering a ride, a kind word, a steadying hand on her elbow when she stumbles. It unsettles her more than Daniel's betrayal. How can this stiff, awkward man inspire a flicker of warmth where Daniel, with all his practiced charm, has left only ashes? Bridget replays their encounters in her head. The way Mark once defended her at a family gathering, stumbling over his words but speaking from a place of truth. The way he listens, truly listens, without turning every moment into a performance. In the privacy of her diary, she admits reluctantly, "Perhaps I have misjudged him. Perhaps beneath the terrible jumper beats a heart that might actually like me, as I am." Madness. She scratches out the word madness, then writes it again. The betrayal by Daniel lingers like a bruise, but it also forces her to look inward. For months, her resolutions had been about changing herself. Less weight, fewer cigarettes, more control. But now she wonders if the real change she needs isn't about numbers or appearances, but about learning to want something better. About daring to imagine that love doesn't have to be a battlefield where she constantly proves her worth. Outside her window, the city keeps moving. Buses rumbling, lovers arguing, strangers brushing past each other on crowded pavements. Bridget watches it all and feels herself at a crossroads. One path leads back to the familiar chaos of Daniel, a cycle of passion and pain she already knows by heart. The other is less certain, paved with awkward silences and unspoken possibilities, but perhaps leading to something gentler, truer. She doesn't know which road she'll take, but as she closes her diary for the night, the pages heavy with ink and self-mockery and hope, she feels a flicker of courage. Maybe heartbreak is not the end of the story. Maybe it is only the middle, the turning point where everything begins to change. The weeks after Daniel's betrayal are a blur of humiliation, anger, and a strange kind of liberation. Bridget, who once clung to every text and every suggestive glance, now sees through the hollow sparkle. The disappointment still stings. The nights of waiting by the phone, the way he could charm her into forgetting herself, the lies layered over lies. But something inside her has shifted. For the first time in years, she begins to ask a daring question. What if I deserve better? That question lingers when her mother's latest scandal explodes. Her father, long accustomed to her mother's whims, now sits silent at the kitchen table, staring into his tea as she chatters about her new adventures with her flamboyant Portuguese suitor. Bridget, who has spent so much time fearing she'll never measure up to her mother's standards, suddenly sees the cracks in that glossy facade. The glamorous television gigs, the endless parties, the desperate reinventions. They are no less messy than Bridget's own fumbling diary entries. Perhaps everyone is stumbling, she thinks, just in different shoes. Mark Darcy reappears, not as a stiff specter at family gatherings, but as someone who keeps showing up when she least expects it. There's no slickness to him, no empty lines. When he helps her with a professional crisis, he doesn't laugh at her missteps. He quietly offers solutions. When she rants about her mother's latest humiliation, he listens, not to fix her, but to understand. And then one evening, in a moment so unpolished it almost passes unnoticed, he blurts it out. "I like you," he says, voice awkward, eyes darting away. "Just as you are." The words stop her cold. No conditions. No weight goals, no makeovers, no need to become someone different. Just as she is, with her flaws, her awkwardness, her insecurities, her messy heart. For a moment, Bridget doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. No one has ever said that to her. Everyone else has spoken in ifs and buts. If you lost weight, if you were more serious, if you stopped being so silly. And here is Mark Darcy, standing in his ridiculous reindeer jumper, telling her she is enough. But the shadows of doubt creep in. Bridget wonders if it's pity. She wonders if he's joking. She scribbles furiously in her diary that night. Mark Darcy likes me? Impossible. Am fat, drink too much, say wrong thing every time, he must be mad or drunk or both. She scratches the words out and rewrites them again, as though repetition might make them truer. The world around her seems determined to pull her back into old patterns. Daniel reappears as if on cue with apologies that sound rehearsed but flattering nonetheless. He insists she misunderstood, that she is the only one that he can change. For a flicker of a moment, Bridget feels that old pull again, the temptation of the familiar chaos. But then she remembers the ache of waiting, the humiliation of betrayal, the way she has been shrinking herself in calories, in spirit, just to fit his life. Her resolutions lie open on the table. No more emotionally unavailable men. She runs her finger over the words, feels the ink pressed into the page. For once, she doesn't cross them out. The year that began with a frantic list of rules is unraveling into something different. Bridget is beginning to see that the real resolution is not about denying herself cigarettes or wine, not about losing pounds or earning approval. It is about stepping into her life as it is, about daring to believe she deserves love without disguise, without performance. As she closes her diary that night, she does not write a list of failures. She writes only one line, simple and startling. Maybe I am enough. Outside, the city hums as always. Buses groaning, voices rising, lights blinking against the darkness. But inside, for the first time in a long time, Bridget feels something like quiet. Not the silence of loneliness, but the stillness of a heart beginning to heal and perhaps to open. The final pages of Bridget's diary are not the frantic scribbles of a woman counting calories or cataloging cigarettes. They are softer, steadier, written in a hand that seems calmer, as though her pen has finally stopped trembling. She has survived heartbreak, humiliation, and the endless chorus of judgmental voices, and somewhere along the way she has found something she never expected. Herself. It doesn't happen with trumpets or fanfare. It happens in small moments. A quiet morning when she wakes up and realizes she hasn't thought of Daniel in days. An afternoon when she turns down a glass of wine, not out of guilt, but simply because she doesn't feel like it. An evening when she laughs with Shazzer, Jude, and Tom and realizes she isn't defined by whether she has a boyfriend at her side. And yet, love does come. Mark Darcy, the man she once dismissed for his reindeer jumper and awkward silences, proves himself in the simplest, most powerful way. He sees her. He doesn't ask her to change, doesn't demand she lose weight or transform into someone more polished. He looks at her across the room, quiet and steady, and says the words she never expected to hear, that he likes her, just as she is. The diary records it in shaky handwriting. He likes me, just as I am. Just as I am. For Bridget, those words land deeper than any grand gesture. They dismantle years of self-doubt, years of believing she needed to be thinner, more organized, more perfect to be worthy of love. In Mark's eyes, she is already enough. And in that reflection, she begins to believe it herself. The year that began with a list of impossible resolutions ends with something far more radical. Acceptance. Acceptance that life will always be messy. That she will never stop spilling wine on her clothes or saying the wrong thing at parties. That her mother will always fuss, her friends will always be gloriously chaotic, and she will never be the glossy, flawless woman she once thought she had to become. And that's all right, because amid the chaos, the laughter in smoky pubs, the disastrous dinners, the heartbreak, and the unexpected kindness, Bridget has found her story. A story not of perfection, but of persistence. Not of becoming someone else, but of learning to live as herself. As she closes the diary with a soft thud, the city outside keeps breathing. Buses rumble, laughter spills from pubs, and fireworks crackle faintly in the night sky. Bridget smiles to herself, a little wiser, still imperfect, still gloriously human. She whispers a final note to her diary, a promise for the days to come, that she will keep writing, keep laughing, and keep stumbling forward, one messy, marvelous page at a time. Page at a time. Page at a time.